coming from a typical middle class family, we always knew about three assets. Like FD is real estate and gold. That's it. The majority of the investments we happen in FDs. Like 92% do not actually still invest in mutual funds. Monday morning you start afresh, because entrepreneurship is not a 1 week journey or a 1 month journey. It is a years long journey. So you need to always detach yourself, and that is where your family time, your friends time basically plays a big role. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put everything in FD, or don't put everything in PPF, or don't put everything in your policies that you buy. Have a hybrid approach, because every instrument, every asset has its own purpose.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Fintech ki Baat Dil Se. In today's episode, we have with us Mr. Sagar Anantwar, founder and CEO of Simplifin. Hey Sagar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, hi Shaz, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you, Sagar, and thank you actually for taking out the time on a Saturday afternoon, to do this. I'm sure all of us are super excited to hear about your story. So before we get into it, right, just a bit overview about Simplifin. Simplifin essentially is an investment platform that provides multiple assets for the retail consumer to go and invest, right, from bonds, FDs, digital gold, mutual funds and whatnot. Along with that, it also kind of provides structured and precise advice to the consumers to kind of invest more properly. So having said that, Sagar, let's dive into it right into our first segment called the Founder Story, wherein we'll learn a bit about your journey and what have you been through, like what inspired you to build. And I'm sure our audiences essentially will be able to kind of extract a lot of insights and inspiration from it. So let's start with a quick background about what your career journey has been like and what kind of got you into the entrepreneurship.
Sure, absolutely. So my journey has been like a typical middle class journey. You can think about it like did my bachelor's from India, then went to the US for my first master's, and this is where my journey in finance also sort of started. Like coming from a typical middle class family, we always knew about three assets. Like FD is real estate and gold. That's it. So started my journey over there. Started investing in gold to start with. And during my tenure, like after my master's, was working in the US, studying the US markets, how the financial systems work. That's where I understood these old assets always don't really work. So started educating myself, learning more about how the financial system actually functions. And that's what got me interested that, hey, like Fintech is something which is going to be big for the future. So around 2016, decided that India is going to be the boom sector or the boom country in the next decade or 2 decades. So made a decision to move back to India, did my MBA, and then have been in India since 2016 ever since. Worked in a couple of startups. And one thing which I noticed, like Fintech was always something which was very near and dear to me. And while I was working in multiple startups post my MBA, one thing which I found was people are highly educated. Like the degrees are increasing, the disposable incomes are increasing. But unfortunately, financial literacy is something that was still not very prevalent. And the way people were investing was still not, I would say, optimal. So back in 2022, 2023 is when I started sort of formulating that, hey, I have the tech knowledge, I have the finance experience and the finance knowledge. Is this a right time for me to start? So I took a step back, thought about it like, hey, I've already led the product division for a couple of startups. So I know how to build the tech. Finance, I already understand. So 2022, 2023 was the time frame when I took the leap. I quit my job and started working full time on this particular idea. And then we launched our product in early 2024 and sort of have never looked back. So I think the journey started with my personal experience and people around me.
Got it. So this Simplifin, your company Simplifin, right, is almost 1.5 year old now?
So on paper, it is just 1 year old. We incorporated in August of 2023.
Oh, so just turned one.
Yeah, exactly. We just turned one on paper, yeah.
Awesome.
But we launched the product just April, May of this year. So we are like around 4 months ish in the
Into
market
the
right now.
market.
Yeah,
Congratulations on your launch.
yeah. Thank you.
Having said that, right, let's take a couple of steps back and talk a bit more about your journey, right? So you went to the US, studied the market side, came back here, did a couple of gigs with the startups as a product head, and then kind of got into your own uh, got into your own entrepreneurship journey. So what was essentially that moment कि आपको हिट हुआ यार खुद का कुछ करते हैं यार ये सब तो चलते रहेगा नौकरी चलते रहेगी वो क्या था जो आप दैट इंस्पायर्ड यू कि नहीं ये करना है खुद का कुछ करना
So एक बात थी कि when I was actually talking to a lot of engineers, product managers, in not just in my company but across different companies and talking to different people, right?
है
One thing was I was anyways managing my own finances. So when we are
Right.
talking about financial markets, stock markets, mutual funds, etc., one thing which I found was people did not understand these concepts very, very well. And they were either like doing all these trades based on tips. Ki one of
Right.
my friend bought this, one of my uncle told me about
Right.
this, and that was the most usual sort of a comment that everybody said. So that's where
True.
I sort of sat back and said, "Ki is there an opportunity or is there a problem that I could solve?" And I took a couple of months, I would say, to think about that. Hey, like, yes, this problem exists, but are there players already in the market that are already solving this?
Right.
And what I found was most of the problems or the most of the products that were out there were solving point problems, like either just mutual funds or just FDs or just
Right.
gold. But when I was managing my own portfolio, like I knew that hey, like you can't really invest everything in one basket. You have to have a diversified portfolio. So that's where I thought that hey, this is a problem that I can actually solve because I understand the tech side of it. I understand the finance side of it. So because again, like starting up is a very difficult decision because
Right.
as you know, like being a founder, like your initial couple of years are going to be very tough. So
True.
I had an honest discussion with the family and said that hey, this is something that I want to focus on, and they were also supportive. So that was like the turning point that hey, problem exists. There is support from everywhere,
Right.
and if I don't do it now, probably I'll regret it for the next couple of years. And that's where like I said that hey, let's take a chance.
Bilkul. Yeah, I think this is great. And what I really see as a recurring theme in all entrepreneurs' journey is कि like founders agar jo hote hai any successful founder or anyone who has actually taken that leap of faith has been able to take it because they had support from their families, colleagues, and they had a basic framework in mind कि यार ये करना है, and they were like very passionate to solve for that problem statement, right? And which kind of also reflects in your journey. So good to see that. One thing specific, right? कि when you again talk about the segment that you're building for and the market that you picked, so what essentially you saw a gap? What gap essentially you saw कि यार नहीं ये चीज अभी भी हो तो रही है because ऐसा तो नहीं था कि म्यूचुअल फंड्स या गोल्ड या बॉन्ड्स में लोग इन्वेस्ट नहीं कर रहे थे, but there was some gap that you saw that you felt कि नहीं this needs to be solved for specifically.
Correct. So absolutely. So if you see the data, right, the majority of the investments maybe happen in FDs. Like 92% do not actually still invest in mutual funds.
Okay.
Now, and there are a lot of other products which there are a lot of investments going in. Now, when you look at investment instruments like PPF, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, SSY, NPS, then there are policies which sort of help, like are pitched to you, like combining insurance and investments. Right. These 4 or 5 instruments, and like just to name a few, have a lot of investments that are coming in. And the problem is these investments actually don't even break even with your inflation rate. So when you actually consider the taxes, you're actually losing money year over year. So you're becoming poorer and poorer even though you invest. So that's where the thought came in that hey, like why don't we start educating people that hey, just investing in these assets is not still the right thing. Right. So there were 2-3 things that we wanted to sort of educate people on. One is what is the approach that you should be taking. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put everything in FD or don't put everything in PPF or don't put everything in your policies that you buy. Have a hybrid approach because every instrument every asset has its own purpose.
True.
FDs have emergency, then your mutual funds, equity mutual funds have your growth, then
True.
your market hedge gold has a different purpose. So we wanted to focus that, hey, people don't understand what is the purpose of every single asset, and then how should they go about actually allocating their money to each of these different assets. So that is the gap that we saw, and we said that, hey, let's try to focus on these educating parts, and then not just educating, helping people to even implement what they are actually learning.
Right. No, makes sense. I think that's a great that's a great problem to solve for, and I think that's actually a need of the hour as well. As more and more people come into the workforce, the younger generation, they are easily influenced by a lot of influencers. Correctly, incorrectly, that's a different story. But इसमें करना चाहिए, इसमें करना ही नहीं चाहिए. There was a recent sentiment perpetuated by big influencer कि FD में invest करो ही मत. Doesn't make sense for you, right? Which I think for a certain age group does not make sense in their early workforce कि यार you don't want to park your money in that. But that also impacted people who are older in that age group कि FD is not breaking even and whatever. So maybe what essentially logic-wise बैठता है नहीं बैठता है and how it comes in, that's a deeper conversation. But overall, it is not that any asset is redundant. Everything would have a purpose, as you said, right? And you need to identify why do you need to invest, for what purpose, and for what term, and accordingly it makes sense, right? So that essentially is a great problem statement to solve for. Having said that, right, let's take a step back here into your journey once again, and kind of would love to understand key. And this is a problem that a lot of entrepreneurs I've seen face कि यार उनको करना होता है entrepreneur, they want to get into building their own startup, building their own company, but they're very confused how do you plan for your finances when say कि यार when you have a corporate job, like you are a product head somewhere, so when you have a job and you know कि हर महीने 1 तारीख को अकाउंट में पैसा आ जाएगा, वो महीने का प्लान है, blah blah blah, and you save certain amount. But when you get into entrepreneurship, that check stops. The salary में hit नहीं होता पहले. And how do you plan for that? कि at least for the foreseeable future, next couple of years, till I'm doing something on my own, मेरे पास पैसे ही नहीं आने वाला. So how do you plan for that? How like कितना पहले से you should plan so that you can start? Like if I'm planning to start something of my own in December, so when should have I started planning for it financially?
Correct. Absolutely. So finance is the most is the biggest hurdle, I would say, when you are actually starting out. क्योंकि emotional family support कर देगी, लेकिन finance is something कि जो you are basically on your own at that point.
बिल्कुल.
So this is a question that, like, when I talk to like early entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs or people who want to get into entrepreneurship, this is the most important question that they ask. And one thing which I always recommend is कि first, when you are even trying to start out, first validate the idea that does it work, does it not work, because you don't want to get into a situation that there is no income coming in and the idea itself is also not something that the market needs. So then you land up in a difficult situation that your business also might not take off and your income has also stopped. So one thing is validate your idea, and how you can, even if the idea is validated, one thing which I usually propose to people is start working on it part-time. Don't leave your full-time job. Keep working full-time, get a steady paycheck, so your income is taken care of, so you're not really worried about your day-to-day needs. And in parallel, start working on small projects to validate your idea. So once you get that validation, yes, the idea is feasible, then start working on it part-time. And again, I would suggest like start working with co-founders, because not everyone is good at everything. So once you have co-founders, you have people who you know and work well with, you can split those responsibilities, and then part-time also sort of works in the initial stages. Now, once you have built it for, let's say, a 6 month, 9 months time frame, and you see that yes, everything is working, that's when you can actually take a leap of faith ki now you have already saved up for 1 year. And that is one thing which you should always do is ki do your financial planning ki how much is your monthly expense and how much do you need to survive for at least the next 1 to 1.5 years. Because you never know when your business is going to take off. So 1 to 1.5 years, while you're actually building it in parallel, try to cut down your expenses, save everything for an emergency fund, work on your startup idea. Now, once you have that emergency fund created for that 1.5 year, your idea is validated, then you can take a leap of faith. कि ठीक है, now I'll just quit my full-time job and start working on it full-time. So
Makes
I'd say like
sense.
8 to 9 months is something you can take to build your 1.5 year worth of corpus. Again, then
Mhm.
that 9 months is a good time frame कि you cut down on your expenses also and increase your savings.
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think that is pretty insightful. I think it will help a lot of people out there in our audiences who are looking to start their own company. Having said that, right, and since you have been in the journey for almost 1.5 years now, one thing that really comes back to me every time I talk to a founder is कि being a startup founder is a very stressful job, even more stressful than being working in a corporate, even at a senior
Mhm.
leadership position, क्योंकि सब पूरे दुनिया का टेंशन पाल रखा है, right? सब कुछ मुझे ही करना है. That is the
Correct.
kind of way it works early on.
Correct.
So essentially, how do you manage that stress? How do you stay sane, and how do you maintain that mental health?
Correct. So absolutely. So being a founder, you have to be 24/7 connected to your business.
Hmm.
Yes, but what I do is like you should always take some time to detach yourself from the business. Spend time
Right.
with your family. Spend time with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are actually doing a startup, like what you said, like you have to worry about marketing, sales, product, tech, partnerships, regulations, everything. So
Mm-hmm.
during the week itself, you're so stressed that if you don't take that break on a weekly basis, it sort of keeps on bubbling up. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say like always take a couple of days, maybe one day a week. Take Sunday for example. Don't focus on your business at all. Just
Mm-hmm.
take your time out, focus on your family, and that one day of Sunday, be it
Hmm.
half a day, be it full day, that's up to you. Recharge yourself completely. So Monday morning when you're there, you're not starting out with stress, you're starting out afresh. So
Right.
every week you basically do a reset. You start Monday on a high, and let's say throughout the week the stress builds up or there is a lot of things that pile up.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday night you de-stress. Sunday entire thing you again take the day rest and
Mm-hmm.
recharge yourself, and Monday morning you start afresh. Because entrepreneurship is not a 1 week journey or a one
Mm-hmm.
month journey. It is a year, like years long journey. So you need to always detach yourself, and that is where your family time, your friends time basically plays a big role.
Definitely. No, thank you so much for that. I think that is really insightful. Having said that, right, let's move on to the final question for
Mhm.
this segment, which is essentially top three don'ts for budding entrepreneurs.
So the first don't I would say is ki, again this is my personal view,
Mm-hmm.
don't go for funding upfront.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you go for like any type of funding, VC funding or angel funding or whatever type of funding, there is always a time pressure on you ki, like you need to actually scale up in a certain amount of time frame,
Right.
which not every business model might be suited for. So
True.
one thing would be ki, don't run after funds like immediately early on.
Mm-hmm.
The second would be don't leave your full-time job the day you think that hey, this is a great idea to work on. Do some POCs, do some MVPs, validate your idea, and
Right.
then once you get some validation, only then jump in full-time.
Hmm.
I would say that is the second thing.
Makes sense.
And the third thing is take a step back and look at your own personality. Now
Mm-hmm.
what do I mean by that is, if you're a person who gets very emotional by small things, don't start up as a single founder. Try to
Hmm.
find a co-founder, because
Right.
if there are two or more people, your emotions get balanced by each other. When you are actually at your low point, your co-founder will help bring your emotions up. When he
Hmm.
or she is at your low point, you can actually bring it up.
Hmm.
So take a step back, evaluate your emotional intelligence, I would say, and then
Mm-hmm.
go for like a solo founder or a founding team per se.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Perfect. I think thank you so much for that. With this, I think we'd like to close our first segment. It has been a pleasure, Sagar, and this has been really insightful so far. Looking forward to an exciting conversation in our second segment, Dandi Ki Baat.
Perfect. Great, cheers.